Hi everyone, welcome to the channel. My name is Marlena Frank. I write young adult fantasy and horror books, short stories, every format I can find. If you're new to the channel, welcome. It has been a hot minute since I have posted a video, especially in like a long form like this on this channel. So hi, welcome back. Thanks for being here. Today I want to talk about writing a series by hand. Now, I know that seems kind of daunting to most writers. Writing like a book on its own by hand is a lot, let alone writing a whole series by hand. But I have done it, and I actually rather enjoyed it. And I wanted to share some of basically my tips and what I learned along the way, and just share my thoughts on the whole process. So back in 2018, my novella, The She-Wolf of Kanta, got released by Radiant Crown Publishing, and they were fantastic. It was wonderful. It was my first solo publication with any publisher. It was awesome. And a few years later, I got the rights back, and I decided to expand it out into a full 5-book series. Readers had been telling me for a while that they really loved the series and they wanted to see it, continue on. It does end on like a, it's a satisfying ending, but it's also a little bit of a cliffhanger. So, and I never really knew if I wanted to continue it or if I, wanted to leave it alone. But the more I thought about it, the more I saw how the story could be continued and how it really should be. So I ended up plotting out a 5-book series from that. Back in 2021, I decided to do the crazy thing of doing a rapid release. And if you're not familiar with this is basically publishing books fairly close together. So my goal was every, I think 3 or 4 months, it was every 3 months, I was going to release one of the books. So I thought, I would take some time in 2021, and then in 2022 I would go in and start releasing the new books along with an updated version of She-Wolf of Kanta with new scenes and everything else. And I was ambitious. I kept to my schedule for the most part, but on the last book I did have to push it out a month because it just was not happening. I'm going to probably stick moving forward to releasing like a book once or twice a year is kind of my normal goal when life is behaving properly and I can focus on it more. But that was a really cool process for me. And really, if you decide to do this, and you decide to do it by hand especially, I am a pantser. So basically, I have story ideas in my head, and then I know generally where the story is going, but I let the characters tell me how the story goes. With writing it by hand, and you're looking at a full series, I highly recommend knowing in advance how many books you want to make this. I also recommend knowing kind of the beats of the story as you're going along. So having an idea of where you generally want it to end. Having an idea of where you want the characters to go. Do you plan to introduce a particular character like in book 3 or book 4, and how do you want that to work out? And sometimes you'll have characters that you do not think are going to end up becoming main characters, and they do. And that's just kind of the writing life, right? So that for me was really important, is sitting down and figuring out not just a storyline that would be good for the second book in the series, but one that would be good for the rest of the series as well. Something that would have an overarching plot line, but also individual plot lines that would be fairly wrapped up in each book. Which is easier said than done, right? But I think that's one of the things that I really love with writing, is that you can do that sort of thing. You can have various plot lines that are completed, but then you have overarching ones that may not be fully there yet. And that's kind of your whole series plot is how I see it. So I ended up releasing, I re-released She-Wolf in 2022, brand new cover, looks fantastic. Harvest Moon Designs over on Facebook did the cover. She was fantastic to work with. She did the whole series for me. And then I also released Blood and Hunters shortly thereafter. Both of those were, right on schedule with everything. Started to get a little weary when I started getting toward the end of the series. Book 4, Fury, was right on time, and then Howl was the one I had to push back a month. I think that was right. It was supposed to come out in I want to say March maybe, but I had to push it back to I think April, and I felt bad about that because you set up your pre-orders and you promise your readers and then you have to push it back, but life happens and that's just kind of how it goes. But to me, it was a really good experience. Now, some people may really benefit from doing a rapid release, and I know authors who do it on a regular basis, or they do it for several years until they have that nice big backlog of books. That doesn't really, I tried it. It didn't really work for me. I think especially since I've got my day job and I write by hand a lot of times, for me it's just, I can't really write that quickly on a regular basis. It was fantastic for this series, and I do recommend trying it once, even if it's for a trilogy or something like that. But I do recommend just trying it if you are, especially if you're an indie published author, a self-published author, because you can really push yourself and see what you're capable of. I can see a dramatic difference in the first book in this series compared to the last book in this series, writing-wise. So it was kind of like a boot camp for me with writing, and but I do recommend it if you are wanting to kind of not only fill out your backlog of books, but also you really want to push yourself to see what you can do. I do recommend, like I said, having story beats when you sit down for each book. As a pantser, I don't make full-fleshed outlines. I will not stick to them if I do. And oftentimes I will be so intimidated by my outline that sometimes it gives me paralysis with writing. And so I tend to have my story beats down. So basically I have maybe 5 points, general points where I want the story to go. And then I kind of let the characters, lead the way and kind of nudge them where I need them to be nudged as the plot goes along. And then I have my overarching plot for the series as well. And that kind of unravels throughout the 5-book series. Another thing that helped me was having a fabulous cover artist on hand who was willing to work with me for all 5 books. And as I went along, I had a better idea of what I wanted on the cover, and then she was able to work with me really closely on that. So, having a cover artist who is willing to work with you is fantastic. And also having an editor. I really appreciated Laura Zielinski, who is my editor for all my indie books at the moment. Basically, she's been there for so many of my novels, and she does a fantastic job. She did from book 2 through book 5 of this series. She edited for me, and she helped me, have a series Bible and stuff where keeping track of all of the little details that can sometimes be lost, and because a 5-book series is no joke. It's pretty intense, right? And I purposefully chose having a young adult series for this, because having a full-fledged 100K plus fantasy book each time that's a lot to rapid release. Also deadlines. Figure out your deadlines, do your best to stick to them, but don't sacrifice your mental health to get books out on time, okay? So, writing is a creative process, and it uses very particular parts of your brain, and don't sacrifice your mental health for a self-imposed deadline. Be kind to yourself on things, and if you've got to push them back, you can. I know Amazon, for example, they will be upset at you if you have to push back a pre-order, but you can only do it once, so use it wisely. And you can only do it once per year with them, I believe, last time I looked. So make sure you're aware of all the rules. Other publishers, Google, Barnes & Noble, Kobo, they don't care as much. They're just like, hey, that's fine, we'll just notify your readers, you know, no big deal. But Amazon is a little bit more of a stickler with that. So just a heads up as you're planning out your rapid release. Ideally, you probably want to have the whole series written beforehand. That would be a much healthier way of doing things. Don't be like me. But if you do decide to do that, just be kind to yourself, set deadlines, you know, plan it out with your editor, plan it out with your cover artist. Like for the last book in this series, I did have to reach out to my editor and let her know, hey, I'm gonna have to push this back. And I thought it was gonna be just a couple of weeks or maybe a month, and it ended up being, I think, more than a month that I had to push it back because I had to fit into her schedule. And that's just, you know, you're collaborating with a bunch of different artists, bunch of different creative people who are willing to, you know, who are willing to do work for you. So, you know, keep that in mind as you're kind of figuring this out, as you're kind of going through this whole process, because it is a process, and be kind to yourself during that process. Like I said, story points and know your beats for each book as you go along, and for your overarching storyline for your series. That's very important. I also prefer having the whole series, well, you know, from book 2 to book 5 in a similar notebook style, just because I like the consistency of it, and it really was able to, like, obviously these don't all fit into one notebook, so they overflow into another one, and then I can just start the next book as I go. But that was really helpful for me. I tend to write in fountain pen instead of going through, like, you know, regular once and done pens. That's just me. I can probably do a whole video on doing, you know, writing books with fountain pens and things like that. So, you know, this has been my process and what I've experienced and what I've learned and the pitfalls that I've found along the way. If you do decide to rapid release and to do a series like this on your own, just be aware of what you're going up against and what you're going to be, you know, have coping strategies and emergency things you can pull out if that happens. So, thank you again for being here. If you liked this video, please, you know, leave it a thumbs up. Like and subscribe. I'm going to try to be doing more of these kinds of videos going forward. And if there's anything that you would like me to tackle, be sure to leave a comment below, letting me know your thoughts. Thank you again for being here. Take care of yourself. Bye.